All right, today we're putting on our detective hats and diving deep into an ancient mystery. We're on the hunt for some of the very first messages ever left by human hands, trying to crack a code that's tens of thousands of years old. So, let's get right into it.
You know, when we think about how humans started communicating, our minds usually jump to incredible cave paintings or, the invention of writing. But what if that's not the beginning? What if the real first chapter of our story is hidden in plain sight, in these tiny, simple marks that are way, way older?
When you hear prehistoric art, you probably picture something like this on the left, those amazing, powerful paintings of bison and horses. And they're incredible, no doubt. But our investigation today, it's all about the quiet, overlooked stuff on the right. Just simple lines, dots, zigzags. They're older, they're more mysterious, and for archaeologists, they might just be the most important clues we have.
So, let's start with part 1. Tiny lines, big mystery. What is the big deal with a few scratches on a rock anyway? Well, as we're about to see, these little lines open up a massive question about the very origins of how we think. See, these marks are so much more than just ancient doodles. They might actually represent a huge leap in human evolution. I mean, the moment one of our ancestors deliberately put a mark on an object to mean something, anything at all, that's a game changer. It's the very beginning of using the physical world to store information outside of our own brains. So, what are we really looking for here? Well, in archaeology, the term geometric design doesn't mean it has to be a perfect shape. It's really just any repeated pattern that isn't a picture of an animal or a person. And this gets us to the absolute core question for any investigator. It's not about how fancy it looks, but simply, was it made on purpose?
And that, of course, leads to the next big question. How on earth can anyone tell if a 70,000-year-old scratch was intentional or just a scratch? Well, this is where the real detective work begins. Let's open up the archaeologist's toolkit. And hey, the archaeologists themselves will tell you, this is the fun part. Proving intent is everything. A line could be a symbol, sure, but it could also be a tooth mark from a hyena, or just damage from getting trampled for 50,000 years. You can't just guess. You have to prove it.
Their secret weapon for this is a science with a really cool name, taphonomy. Honestly, you can think of it like CSI for ancient objects. It's the whole scientific process of ruling out every other possible explanation. Animal activity, natural weathering, accidental damage, until the only thing left on the table is a human hand, making a mark with a purpose. And this is how they do it. It's a real step-by-step process. First, they check the context. Where was it found? Was the layer of dirt undisturbed? Then, they put it under a microscope, looking for the unique V-shaped groove that a stone tool makes. They even do their own experiments, scratching up similar materials to see what an accidental butchery cut looks like versus a deliberate engraving. And only after they've used taphonomy to rule everything else out, only then do they get to ask the exciting question, is there a pattern here? Okay, theory time is over. Let's put that toolkit to work. We're opening our first case file, a groundbreaking discovery from a place called Blombos Cave in South Africa. A discovery that literally rewrote our understanding of the ancient human mind.
And the first piece of evidence we need to look at is the date. The artifacts from this site are from 77,000 years ago. Let that sink in. That is just staggeringly old. It pushed the evidence for symbolic thinking back by tens of thousands of years in one go. So what did they actually find? Well, the star witnesses are these little pieces of red ochre, which is a kind of natural pigment. And as you can see, they have these clearly engraved cross-hatch patterns on them. Now here's the clincher. The analysis shows the surfaces were scraped clean before they were marked. And they weren't found in a vacuum. They were discovered in a secure layer right alongside beautiful shell beads and other advanced tools. It was a whole package of complex symbolic behavior.
Simply put, Blombos was a bombshell for archaeology. It was the first solid, undeniable proof that our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens in Africa, were thinking in symbols, creating patterns with shared meaning long, long before any of that famous cave art ever appeared in Europe. Okay, for our next case file, we're going to jump forward in time and hop over to another continent. We're heading to a region in modern-day Germany called the Swabian Jura, where the symbolic world starts to get even richer and more complex. This timeline really helps put it all into perspective, right? I mean, look at that huge gap between Blombos and these European artifacts, and then look at the even bigger gap between those early marks and what we'd call a real writing system. We are talking about deep, deep human history here. So, in these German caves, archaeologists found some of the world's oldest figurative sculptures, these incredible tiny ivory figurines of animals, and even the oldest known musical instruments, actual flutes made from bone. But here's what's so fascinating for our case. On those very same stunning objects, they also found our mysterious geometric marks, rows of dots, little notches, and sequences of crosses.
And that is the key insight here. These marks weren't made in isolation. They were part of a world that was just overflowing with symbolism, with art, with music, with personal ornaments, and that context makes the argument that these little lines and dots were also part of a bigger system of meaning much, much stronger.
So what were these marks actually for? This quote really sums it up perfectly. We shouldn't think of this as a full alphabet, not for spelling out words like we do. It's way better to think of it as an early symbolic toolbox. It's a set of agreed-upon signs that could be used for all sorts of things. Maybe for counting, for remembering lunar cycles, or just for decoration. It's a system for storing and sharing information.
Okay, we have examined the evidence from our case files, we've reviewed the forensic methods, now it is time to bring it all together for the verdict.
First things first, the verdict is in. Based on all that rigorous scientific work, the microscopy, the taphonomy, the experiments, we can say with confidence, these marks were not accidental.
Second, we know that these were not random doodles. The repetition, the clear patterns, the fact that surfaces were often prepared beforehand, it all points to marks that were deliberately planned and carefully executed.
And third, this is maybe the most important point of all. This is not the work of some so-called primitive cavemen. These marks were made by people who were just as smart as we are today, with minds that were fully capable of abstract, symbolic thought.
And that leads us to the final, crucial takeaway from our entire investigation. This evidence proves that our ancient ancestors were doing so much more than just surviving. They weren't just hunting and gathering. They were living rich, complex social lives, and they were actively making meaning in their world.
So in the end, we've kind of cracked the case. We know that they were communicating with symbols. The evidence is overwhelming. But the deepest mystery of all, of course, is what were they actually saying? And that is a code we might never fully crack. What do you think those marks meant?